Hey, I found out my friend had used my bathing towel, not borrowed it and told me she used it, hung it back up on the same hook, exactly the same way she found it, hoping I'd never notice. I noticed, and here's the strange part. The thing that bothered me wasn't even the towel itself, it was the silence around it, the fact that she didn't think to ask, the fact that some part of her assumed my things, my body adjacent items were just available, no permission required. If you ever had a moment like that, small on paper, but somehow it cracked up something open in you, stay with me for this one because today we're talking about boundaries, specifically how to set them without spending the rest of the day drowning in guilt for simply asking to be respected. Hey. Welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. This channel is for honest conversations about becoming the woman you keep promising yourself you'll become. And today's topic might be one of the most requested ones I get: boundaries. Specifically, why setting them feels so unbearably guilty, even when we are completely in the right. Here's what we're covering today. First, I'm going to tell you the full story behind that opening line, what actually happened with my friend, and the slow motion realization that followed it. Secondly, we'll talk about why boundaries trigger guilt in the first place, even when the other person is clearly the one who crossed the line. And thirdly, I'll give you the exact practical framework I use now, specific phrases, specific steps, so you can set a boundary the next time you need one without spiraling into guilt for the rest of the day. So, right now, get comfortable. This won't worth the full minutes we're gonna spend in this video. So, let's get at it. So, let me actually tell you what happened. A friend of mine, someone I've known for years, someone I trusted enough to hand a spare key to, was staying over at my place for a few days. Totally normal. We'd done this plenty of times before. She knew where everything was, which honestly made things easier. She didn't need a towel. One morning, I walked into the bedroom and noticed my towel wasn't quite hanging the way I'd left it. Small thing, the kind of detail you actually shrunk off. But something about the way it was folded, the fact that it was damp in a way it shouldn't have been if I hadn't used it yet that day, made me pause. I didn't see anything right away. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I left it like that. Maybe I was being paranoid over nothing. But a day later, almost in passing, she mentioned that her own towel was still tangled up in her overnight bag, unwashed from the trip, and she just grabbed whatever was hanging there the first thing morning. She said it lightly, like it was a logistics update, not a confession. And I want you to notice something about that sentence because it's the whole point of this video. I just grabbed whatever was hanging there. Not, can I use your towel? Mine's still packed. Not even an apology after the fact. Just a casual mention, like my personal towel had quietly become communal property the second she needed one. I sat with that for a second, and then I felt something rise up in me that I almost didn't recognize because I wasn't used to feeling it clearly. I was actually upset, not in a dramatic, storm out way, in a quiet, this actually matters to me anyway. But right behind that feeling came the other one. the one most of us know intimately. Guilt, immediate, automatic guilt for being upset about something so small. A voice in my head started doing its usual job. It's just a towel. She probably didn't think about it. Don't make this a thing. You seem petty. She's your friend. This isn't worth a conversation. That voice is so familiar to so many of us. It shows up the instant we feel a boundary has been crossed, and it tries to talk us out of saying anything dressed up as reasonableness. Don't make it weird. It's not that big. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. Here's what I want you to notice, though the size of the object was never the actual issue. A towel is small. The principle underneath it is not. The principle is this: somebody used something deeply personal, something that touches my body directly without asking, and then mentioned it like it required no acknowledgement at all. That's not about it all. That's about whether my no, please ask first matters, even on the smallest, most mundane level. I ended up saying something, not a confrontation, not a lecture, just a clear sentence, something like, "Hey, I actually really don't love sharing towels. Even unknowingly, there are clean ones in the closet. Can you just grab one of those or ask me next time?" She paused. Then she actually apologized genuinely and said she hadn't even thought about it that way. To her, it really had felt like whatever was hanging there because that's just how she'd grown up sharing things with siblings, no malice, just a different sense of what counts as personal. And that's actually the most important part of the whole story. She wasn't a valiant, she wasn't trying to disrespect me. She just had a different internal map of what shared space meant. And without a boundary clearly stated, she had no way of knowing where my line actually was. The boundary wasn't punishment, it was information she didn't have until I gave it to her. Let's zoom out from the toil for a second, because I think the story is a perfect, almost embarrassingly small example of a much bigger pattern. Why does setting a boundary, even a completely reasonable one, make so many of us feel like we did something wrong? Here's the truth: guilt and wrongdoing are not the same thing. Guilt is a feeling, it can show up whether or not you've actually done anything wrong. A lot of us were raised in environments, families, friend groups, even workplaces where keeping the peace was treated as the highest virtue a woman could have. Don't cause friction. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't be difficult. So when we finally do something that might cause a little friction, even something as small as asking someone not to use our tool, our nervous system reads it as a violation of the rules we were taught, even though the actual violation was committed by someone else first. This is the part that took me a long time to fully understand. The guilt you feel when setting a boundary is very rarely about whether the boundary is reasonable. It's almost always about whether you were taught that your comfort and your no were allowed to matter as much as everyone else. Think about how often this shows up in bigger versions of the same pattern. A coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting and you feel guilty for correcting the record. A family member oversteps into your finances or your parenting choices and you feel guilty for asking them to stop. The actions get bigger, but the internal script stays exactly the same. Don't make this a big deal. Don't make them feel bad. Smooth it over. I want to give you a distinction that changed how I think about this completely. There's a difference between guilt and discomfort, and most of us have been mislabeling one as the other for years. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Discomfort says, I'm doing something new and my body doesn't have a category for it yet. Setting a boundary, especially for the first time with a particular person, is almost always going to produce discomfort. That's not a sign you are in the wrong. That's just a sign you're doing something your body isn't used to yet. The mistake most of us make is treating that discomfort as proof we should stop instead of just a normal byproduct of growth. You don't stop the gym because your muscles feel sore. The soreness is the evidence that something is changing. Laundry discomfort works the same way. Let's talk about what happens if I had decided not to say anything that day. If I had let that towel comment slide because it felt too small, too embarrassing, too not worth bringing up. On the surface, nothing dramatic would have happened. Would have stayed friends. There won't have been a fight. But here's what would have quietly built underneath the surface. A small, simmering resentment that I've never gave her the chance to actually address because I never told her there was anything to address. This is the part nobody wants you about. Unspoken boundaries don't disappear. They don't evaporate just because you decided the moment wasn't worth bringing up. They get stored. And every time something similar happens again, she borrows something else without asking. She assumes access to something else of mine. That stored resentments get a little heavier until one day it explodes over something that looks, from the outside, wildly disproportionate to whoever is standing in front of you. People who don't set small boundaries don't actually become more peaceful. They become quietly resentful, and then occasionally they become explosive, seemingly out of nowhere, over something that was never really about that specific moment. It was about every unspoken moment that came before it. A boundary stated clearly and early is so much kinder to both people than a resentment that festers silently and detonates later. The version of me who said something about the towel gave my friend a chance to understand me better and adjust. The version of me who said nothing would have just quietly recategorized her in my head as someone slightly less safe to be around without ever giving her the information she had needed to do anything differently. Okay, so how do you actually do this? Set the boundary without marinating in guilt for the rest of the day. Here's the framework I use now, broken into four parts. So, step one, separate the size of the object from the size of the principle. What do we mean by this? Before you talk yourself out of saying anything because it seems small, ask yourself, is this actually about the object or about whether my no gets respected? A towel is small. My boundaries matter even in small moments. It's not small at all. Once you reframe it this way, it becomes much easier to speak up because you are not defending a towel. You are defending a principle that applies to every other area of your life too. Second, state it as information, not accusation. Now, this is the single biggest shift that makes boundary conversation go smoothly instead of becoming confrontations. Instead of, I can't believe you did that. Try, hey, I actually don't love X. Can you do Y? Instead, next time, you're handing the other person a map, not a verdict. Most people, like my friend, genuinely didn't realize they crossed a line. Giving them the information calmly gives them a real chance to adjust instead of putting them on the defensive. The third one, let the silence after you speak exist without rushing to feel it. This is the hardest part, and it's the part most people skip too. So, after you state the boundary, your nervous system is going to scream at you to immediately soften it. Apologize for bringing it up or over explain why you feel this way. Resist that urge. A short pause after a boundary is not a crisis. It's just two people adjusting to a new piece of information. Let it sit there for a second before you say anything else. Fourthly, remind yourself that discomfort is not a signal to retreat. Ah, the guilt wave is going to come almost every time, especially the first times you practice this. When it does, don't treat it as proof you did something wrong. Treat it as the predictable temporary sensation of doing something your body isn't fully used to yet. It gets quieter every single time you do this and watch nothing catastrophic happen as a result. Practice this on the small stuff, the towel level moments, and you build the exact muscle you need for the bigger ones later. The coworker, the overstepping relative needs a clearer boundary too. Small reps build big strength. That's true in the gym and it's true here too. Here's what I want you to remember today. A boundary is not an accusation. It's not cruelty. It's not making a big deal out of nothing. A boundary is simply you telling someone clearly and kindly where your line is so they actually have the chance to respect it. The guilt you feel when you set one is not proof that you're wrong. It's just proof that you're doing something your nervous system isn't used to yet. And every single time you do it anyway, that guilt gets a little quieter and your own voice gets a little louder. You don't need permission to protect your own space, your body, your own peace, and even the small towel sized version of it. If this story made you think of your own version, maybe not a towel, maybe a phone, a diary, a closet, a car, anything that felt like mine until someone decided otherwise, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. You'd be amazed how many people are sitting with a story just like this one, feeling like it's too small to mention. It's not too small. Tell me about it. If this video helped you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications because next week videos pairs perfectly with this one. We're talking about spotting one-sided relationships, the ones where you're always the one adjusting and nobody else seems to notice. And if you know someone who needs permission to set a boundary they have been putting off, send this to them today. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is remind them, yeah, no was always allowed to count. I'll see you in the next video.